Dante's Ninth Circle of Hell. Kind of like my class. No. Dante's Ninth Circle of Hell. It is the rock bottom. It is the lowest place he can imagine. And I think we can all agree at this point, he's got quite an imagination. One of my favorite little twists on this, just a personal thing, is he imagines hell, which for quite some time, the predominant view of which was always that it's very hot. He says, no, it's very cold. I like this because I hate the cold, and yes, I would say that that is the worst thing you could possibly have. That is hell. It's also, I can see a particular opinion you might expect from someone who grew up in Florence, which is in the middle of Italy, but it's relatively warm there, very temperate, doesn't get too cold. It's quite pleasant year-round. And he was also a diplomat, so he was used to traveling, perhaps north, where it is cold. So he understood cold as only someone raised in a warm southern climate could. And when he has to draw a picture of hell, it's cold. Ice. A frozen lake of ice. These are, this is another one of the images. I showed you some last week. Etchings by an artist named Doré, who did some really evocative images of the different circles of the Inferno. He starts off 32 on a note of some drama, some perhaps sincere honesty, and some calculation. If I had rhymes as harsh and horrible as the hard fact of that final dismal whole which bears the weight, more weight, of all the steeps of hell, I might more fully press the sap and substance from my conception. But since I must do without them, I begin with some reluctance. If I had rhymes as harsh and horrible, I don't know if I'm poet enough to do this. I don't know if I have the strength and the mettle to describe fully exactly what I need to say. But I will try. How heroic of him. Quite a pose. By saying you don't know you have the genius to actually do justice to the images you see or recall, and then going on and actually painting those images, you're setting up this gargantuan challenge only for yourself to succeed in that sense. And he even makes another leap into classicism with the invocation of the muses. Remember, the Iliad begins with an invocation of the muse. The gods have to help me. I can't tell this story on my own. Please inspire me with the language and the strength to convey what I have seen. In his words, but may those ladies of the heavenly spring who helped Amphion wall themes assist my verse, that the word may be the mirror of the thing. The word may be the mirror of the thing. Interesting. The mirror. When you look in a mirror, what are you seeing? What? You're seeing a reflection of yourself, yes. Is it an exact reflection? Is it exactly how you look? No? Why? It's inverted. you have a pimple on your left nose, on the left side of your nose, it will appear on the right side of your nose. It's not quite reality.
Subjective as well.
What's that?
Subjective.
It's subjective. You're looking directly at yourself. It's a little bizarre. It's an image that needs to be interpreted. It's an image that needs to be understood to be not the thing, but only an appearance of the thing. Now here I want to go back to a word I dropped last week. Allegory. Abstract meaning through a physical object, also known as a symbol. Allegory is the principal mode of medievalism, also in a way modernism. You cannot portray the actual thing. You can only portray an image of that thing, and that image needs to be read, needs to be deconstructed, needs to be pulled apart and interpreted by an active reader. Dante is warning right here that this needs to be done. He has been warning throughout. Constant references to this being a poem, constant references to the art of poetry in general. We see a remarkable number of writers throughout the Inferno. It's something he wants everyone to be conscious of. Of course, at this moment, because he is embarking on the deepest of the deep, the well of hatred, at the most horrific spot in the universe, this is when, logically, he would say, all right, I'm about to go into this, God help me. This is when he needs his greatest powers. This is when he needs his fullest expertise. Who is suffering in this pit? What is this reserved for? Are they murderers? Rapists? Murderers? Yeah, but that's not really the only part of it. They are, by and large, traitors. People who betrayed their families and their country. Treason. Which is an odd sin to be the number one sin.
Because it's Dante.
It is Dante's Inferno. He is casting this. We'll get to that. He's wandering along. What is this? Looking at all of these souls stuck in ice, just their heads above the surface. They cannot even cry because their tear ducts are frozen, which I think is a remarkable image because they cannot even express their anguish in the most bestial way. Even dogs can cry. Don't quote me on that. I don't know that for sure. My daughter would smack me if she heard me say something wrong about dogs. When I had stared about me, this is line like 40. When I had stared about me, I looked down, and at my feet I saw two clamped together, so tight that the hair of their heads had grown together. "Who are you," I said, "who lie so tightly breast to breast?" They strained their necks, and when they had raised their heads as if to reply, the tears their eyes had managed to contain up to that time gushed out, and the cold froze them between the lids, sealing them shut again, tighter than any clamps grips wood to wood, and mad with pain, they fell to butting heads like billy goats in a sudden savage mood. Like billy goats, they are reduced to animals. There is nothing human about them in this state. And a wraith who lay to one side and below, and who had lost both ears to frostbite, said, his head still bowed, "Why do you watch us so? If you wish to know who they are who share one doom, they own the Vicenzio's valley with their father, whose name was Albert. They sprang from one room, yada, 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 yada." I don't mean to yada, yada, horrible suffering, but I'm going to. He comes across others. I cannot say, but as I trailed my guide among those heads, they're walking along, my foot struck violently against the face of one. Weeping, it cried, "Why do you kick me? If you were not sent to wreak some further vengeance for Monteperti, why do you add this to my other torment?" "Master," I said, "grant me a moment's pause to rid myself of a doubt concerning this one. Then you may hurry me at your own pace." Which again seems a little snide to Virgil, almost as if, yeah, all right, give me a minute, then sure, you can hurry me along. It's a little snarky. The master stopped at once, and through the volley of foul abuse the wretch poured out, I said, "Who are you who curse others so?" And he, "And who are you to go through the dead larder of Antenor, kicking the cheeks of others so hard that you were alive? You could not kick harder." "I am alive," I said, "and if you seek fame, it may be precious to you above all else that my notes on this descent include your name." Now, a couple of things here. He is walking along this frozen lake. He kicks somebody in the head. And then he attacks him. Now, granted, the guy frozen in the lake sort of shouted at him first, but in most, situations like that, you bump into someone in the subway, they might give you a little attitude, "Hey, watch out, hey, I'm sorry." That's not the instinct here. The instinct here is to bite back. "Who are you?" Immediate aggression, immediate hostility, reflexive, instinctual hostility. And he's driving home, some sore points here. He immediately zooms in on, "I am alive, you're dead. Nya, 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 nya." And then if that wasn't bad enough, he says, "Yeah, why don't you tell me your name? I'm alive. I'm going to go back up to Earth soon, and I will tell everybody about this pathetic fate you found for yourself. I'll make you famous. Doesn't everyone want to be famous? I'll make you famous." Exactly. It's hostile. They're biting back at one another in language, in words. They are trying to hurt one another with words. Exactly the opposite is my wish and hope, he answered. Let me be, for it is little you know of how to flatter on this icy slope. Let me be. He's pleading for, here, pity, mercy. Dante doesn't have that anymore. I grabbed the hair of his dog's ruff, and I said, dog's ruff. Grabbed him by his head, by the hair on the back of his head, like a dog. More reduction to an animal state, refusing to recognize any kind of humanity. And I said, either you tell me truly who you are, or you won't have a hair left on your head. Why? The guy is stuck in ice. Dante is free to move around. Why bore in on this? If not for some lust to threaten, for dominance. And he, not though you snatch me bald. I swear I will not tell my name or show my face, not though you rip until my brain lies bare. He's still fighting back. He's not cowering. He's still antagonistic. I had a good grip on his hair. Already I had yanked out more than one fistful of it while the wretch yelped, but kept his face turned from me. They're not recognizing one another. They're not communicating on any level. When another said, Bocca, what is it ails you? What the hell's wrong? Isn't it bad enough to hear you bang your jaws? Must you bark too? So now his neighbor is complaining about him, and they're snapping at one another. Notice also, bang your jaws, bark too. Again, the reduction to a dog-like state, an animal. Bocca, incidentally, is not only the first name of this individual, as you can see from the footnotes. Bocca in Italian means mouth. So between that, jaws, the repeated verbal invective getting tossed around at one another, you can see a pattern coming out of them using their mouths an awful lot. It is arguable, and it has been argued, that they are nothing but mouths at this point. Bocca cannot move except his mouth. And he's using it the only way he knows how, in hostility, to express words of anger and frustration. Now, filthy traitor, say no more, I cried, for to your shame I shall bear back a true report of you. That's just gratuitous cruelty at that point. Yeah, I'm going to go back and tell everyone how I saw you. I'm going to make your family feel even more shame. Moving on, he says, leaving him then, I saw two souls together in a single hole, and so pinched by the ice that one head made a helmet for the other. As a famished man chews crusts, so the one sinner sank his teeth into the other's nape at the base of the skull, gnawing his loathsome dinner. Again, the references to the mouth. He chews. And now we have cannibalism. Titius in his final raging hour gnawed Menelaus's head with no more fury than this one gnawed at skull and dripping gore. Name-checking more classical poetry and saying, yeah, that was good, but I'm better. You there, I said, who show so odiously your hatred for that other, tell me why on this condition, that if in what you tell me you seem to have a reasonable complaint against him you devour with such a foul relish, I, knowing who you are, and his soul's taint, may speak your cause to living memory, God willing, the power of speech is left to me. Repeated references here to his ability to talk, to speak, to use words, to use his mouth, to form words. Bocca, this person, they're all just mouths. They're all using their mouths in aggressive and hurtful, bestial ways. And Dante is including himself in this moment. "33. The sinner raised his mouth from his grim repast and wiped it on the hair of the bloody head whose nape he had all but eaten away," which is about as horrific an image as you can imagine. At last he began to speak. "You ask me to renew a grief so desperate that the very thought of speaking it tears my heart in two." Could have had any lines come out of this character's face at this moment. Dante chooses to have it be a reference that you making me speak, you making me tell my story causes me more pain. The words themselves cause pain. "But if my words be a seed that bears the fruit of infamy, for him I know I shall weep, but tell my story through my tears. Who you may be and by what powers you reach into this underworld I cannot guess, but you seem to me a Florentine. How? By your speech." Recognizing the speech, the words of another, signaling that this is about language. He is recognized by his use of speech, the use of his mouth. And then we get the story of Count Ugolino. Ugolino was it's a long, complicated story. I don't want to get into it, but basically, for political purposes and treason on his part, he was locked in a tower with his sons, his family, and locked in the tower. They all began to starve, and over time, the implication is that they turn to cannibalism, eating one another, eating one's family. He tells it in another long monologue. Whenever you see a long speech, a long monologue, this should ring bells, because why is this so long? It usually takes very little time to tell me a whole lot of stories, but now you have somebody who's really dwelling on it. And you can see him sort of enjoying this speech in all of its horror because he likes to hear himself talk. The self-absorption signals a further separation from the people he's talking to. The self-absorption signals a total lack of communication, a failure of language itself. After a couple of days, locked in the tower, Gatto the eldest fell before me and cried, stretched at my feet upon that prison floor, "Father, why don't you help me?" There he died. And just as you see me, I saw them fall one by one on the 5th day and the 6th. Then, already blind, I began to crawl from body to body, shaking them frantically. 2 days I called their names, and they were dead. Then fasting overcame my grief and me. Now, that's horrible. it never actually says, and then I ate my sons and my grandsons and all the little kids. It ends enigmatically. After this horrible speech, he just says, fasting overcame my grief and me. The implication is he ate his children and grandchildren. The suggestion, however, is only that. You need to read into the words. You need to sense the words and what they are doing on an allegorical level to understand what's going on. Language itself is kind of a dead end. His eyes narrowed to slits, and when he was done, he seized the skull again between his teeth, grinding it as a mastiff grinds a bone. Another dog reference, another animal reference, another reference to teeth, and that visceral verb, grinding, to give a sense of the dumb, instinctual nature of it. And from there, and that tiny little moment where you're right there at the base of the neck and you're listening to the grinding of teeth on bone, which is so close, Dante brings it back to a wide angle, from an extreme close-up to a panoramic wide. Ah, Pisa! Foulest blemish on the land, where sea sounds sweet and clear, since those nearby you are slow to blast the ground on which you stand. Ugolino was a Pisan, so he's talking about this, a rival city to Florence, so he already feels a little bit of that antagonism. Oh, those guys, they all suck. But he also couches it in sensitive language, where sea sounds sweet and clear, where the particular language, the ability to speak, has a certain sweetness to it in Pisa. The instinct to celebrate and denigrate go hand in hand. You can't have one with the other here. And he is once again trying to bridge these dueling instincts into a coherent vision. The final interaction with human beings comes at the end of this canto when he comes across Ser Branco Dorio, who was so corrupt that when Dante comes across him, he says, "You're alive! I just saw you, walking around. You're up in Florence right now. What's with you?" And he says, No. I was so bad, so corrupt. The devil stole me down here and left my body up there. Still walking around as if alive, but possessed by the devil, even while I suffer down here. Which is taking it up a notch even from when he had Pope Nicholas look around from his hole and wonder if that was actually Pope Boniface behind him, the sitting pope at the time. Now Dante is saying that, no, there are a lot of people walking around Earth right now who are simultaneously burning in hell. That shows a certain pitiness, or pitilessness, rather, a certain pettiness. It shows his political instinct, because this was certainly someone he knew and perhaps who betrayed him, somebody who worked in Florentine government, for whom Dante would have hesitations, shall we say. But I find it significant that this is the last real person that he comes across and has any interaction with. This is the worst of the worst. Somebody who was a betrayer of the public trust. Somebody who practiced treason. And it's somebody Dante knew probably fairly well. Now, the final canto, 34, opens again with a martial image. On march the banners of the king of hell, my master said. Toward us, look straight ahead. Can you make him out of the core of the frozen shell? On the banners, imagine waving flags, but they are the flags of hell. Like a whirling windmill seen afar at twilight, or when a mist has risen above the ground, just such an engine rose upon my sight. Sight has been a repeated reference throughout the poem. Hell is a very dim place. Dante, at certain points, has to take breaks to let his vision adjust to the darkness. He's always struggling to see something, and it's not hard to see that as an allegory of struggling for a vision, struggling to see the truth. Stirring up such a wild and bitter wind, I cowered for shelter at my master's back, there being no other windbreak I could find, which, again, seems like he's snarking on Virgil a little bit. Like, yeah, I had nothing better, so I used him as a rock to hide behind. I stood now where the souls of the last class, with fear my verses tell it, another explicit reference to the act of writing poetry, were covered wholly. They shone below the ice like straws in glass. Some lie stretched out, others were fixed in place, upright, some on their heads, some on their souls, another like a bow bends foot to face. When we had gone so far across the ice that it pleased my guide to show me the foul creature that once had worn the grace of paradise, he made me stop. Stepping aside, he said, "And now see the face of Dis. This is the place where you must arm your soul against all dread." So he's walked across this lake. He sees these bodies, if you can even call them that, contorted into torturous, frozen positions. None of them recognizable, none of them individualized, none of them have any sign of life about them, nothing human. And after that, they're going to see Dis, which is one of several names for Satan. Dante uses many of them because, again, he's pointing out language, trying to get you to think about, well, this word and that word. Do not ask, reader, direct address, he's writing a poem, how my blood ran cold and my voice choked up with fear. I cannot write it. This is a terror that cannot be told. And yet he's going to tell it. I did not die, and yet I lost life's breath. Imagine for yourself what I became. Calling on you directly to read into what he is writing. His words are not enough. You need to step up and do your part. You need to take an active role in interpreting this experience. The emperor of the universe of pain jutted his upper chest above the ice, and I am closer in size to the great mountain the Titans make around the central pit than they to his arms. Now, starting from this point, imagine the whole that corresponds to it. Imagine calling on you again and again to bring your own effort to this enterprise of making meaning. It was at once as beautiful as now if he was once as beautiful as he is now hideous and still turned on his maker, well may he be the source of every woe. The story of Satan is that he was originally one of the angels of heaven, one of God's favorites, but he rose up in rebellion against God. God cast him down into this pit that he now reigns as kind of the prince of hell. Who are the last three humans Dante sees in this story?
Judas.
Judas, who is?
The traitor of Jesus, right? And I don't know his name, but he was the guy that got Julius Caesar.
Owen, you know, you can help out. What? Brutus and
the other Roman.
And his friend.
Yeah.
You know, poor Cassius, come on. He's one of the three worst sinners in all humanity, and all you get is, you know, the other guy. Perpetual supporting player in life and afterlife. Yes. Judas, who betrayed Christ to the Romans and led to the crucifixion, is being perpetually chewed in one of the three mouths of Satan. Now, I will point out, as I have in the past, the number 3 is all over this poem. So, of course, Satan has 3 mouths, a 3-headed dragon, sort of like the development of Cerberus at the very beginning, the 3-headed dog who was guarding the entrance to hell. Now you have a 3-headed, essentially he sounds like a dragon, at the center of hell, or at the pit of hell. So one, he's chewing Judas. Now, anybody who spends 2 minutes in a in a Christian theology class will know that, okay, Judas is a bad guy. He's maybe the worst guy because he betrayed Christ. But why Cassius and Brutus? And there I'm going to put Cassius first because, you know, props. Why Cassius and Brutus? Are they really on the same level as Judas?
It's probably just Dante, like, showing his proud national towards, like, because they're Roman. So, like, Gustave and Julius Caesar, really big bad things for Italian. I guess that's what I
Yeah. He had considerable Italian pride.
And treachery.
But, you know, he made treachery the worst sin. Again, not rape, not murder, so to speak.
No, because like I said, it's a reflection of how they did Dante, why he had to be exiled, and it's like an attack on politicians.
Yeah. Dante likes. Dante believes in empire. Dante's big issue, the reason that led to his exile, was the belief that the church in the Vatican was meddling too much in the affairs of secular government. He viewed the state as having a distinct role covering everything that happens on earth, and the church dealing exclusively with matters of the soul. And it was only when he saw the church meddling in matters of worldly import, in matters of power politics, in matters of taxation, in matters of military conquest, and the church was intimately involved in all of those things. It's only when he saw that he started to speak up and denounce members of the church. So for him, betraying the civic order is the paramount sin, or at least on the same order as the betrayal of Jesus Christ. You cannot draw a line between them. Which is more important? I'm not sure. But the point is, he is taking this moment and bridging even more gaps. He has the Christian element of Judas. He has the classical element of the Roman culture. He has spirituality and civic. And he has universal he has a matter of universal import. Hell, where he sees interwoven into that, part of its patterning, he sees his own particular edge. The political, the personal weighs in every bit as much as the theological and the governmental. It is all part of a universe that he is trying to organize, trying to structure together. I point out all of this, all of these levels of hell are an intricate pattern, vigorously organized in an effort to apply some logic to life. He has seen everything he cared about taken away from him. He is wandering around saying, what the hell happened to me? This is the only way he can make sense of it. This is the only way he can stitch together some sort of logic to what has happened to him. This is the only way he can find faith, by creating a universe that makes sense to him. Now, after he sees this vision of Satan is also kind of a dumb creature. Satan, no dialogue, no lines. He's just sitting there monstrously chewing. Again, more bestial behavior. There's nothing interesting about him. There's nothing particularly powerful about him. He's thoroughly unimpressive aside from his size. Many critics will tell you that this is a sign of a purely negative force. If God is omnipotent, Satan, similar in size perhaps, I don't know, but powerless. He is stuck in the ice. He cannot move. He cannot speak. He has no power of expression. All he does is eat, reduced to the most animalistic, bestial instincts. But they come out. They come out through a small, round opening, we are told. They are on the shores of Purgatory, the mountain that will be the setting of the next canticle. But what's the last image? What do they do when they're standing there on the beach? They look up at the stars. They look at the light. And what was the light? The light is the evidence of the mind of God. After going through hell and seeing this vast interworking of divine organization, you get this image of Dante staring up at the stars that are evidence of the divine mind, the mind of God. Distant. But what I say is that it's not just an image of the stars, but is of him looking up at them. The last line is looking up at the stars, le stelle. So now, it's not just an image of the distance, the overwhelming unknowability of God. Now it's an image of, I just walked through hell. I just saw the most precise engineering I've ever seen. The mind of God enacted in a structural layering of reality. I've seen all that. And I'm going to come out and I'm going to look up at the mind of God, and kind of like Adam in Michelangelo's picture, it's not, the drama isn't on the overwhelming unknowability of God. The drama is on, I think I get it. I think I see something. I'm looking at the mind of God and the evidence I see here on earth, and maybe it's starting to become clearer. Maybe I'm starting to get an idea. Maybe I have the ability to understand, to not just cower in ignorance, but to stand on my own 2 feet and guess the mind of God. All of the imagery leads to this moment of standing there in a position of not defiance, not humility, but a position of strength and progress made. A position of getting just a little closer to divinity itself and knowing you can do it. It's conceivable now. It is the next goal. This is why I say he is patient zero of the Renaissance, because he is pointing the way to understanding the mind of God and to positioning humanity itself as a fair judge. Because humankind is worth considering. God is up there, he's still in the picture, but humankind has the dignity and the depth to merit some recognition in that portrait.